This is the last kind of nuts and bolts training for a couple of weeks. Tonight we're going to learn about how to plan actions and why we plan actions and how to do them better or worse. And then next week we're going to turn to some topical discussions to give folks some vocabulary and background knowledge around some of the topics that we think are more likely than not to be things that Occupy activists would want in their tool belt. So next week is foreclosure and consumer debt. The week after is sort of an economics 101 with Professor John Foster from the U of O, who teaches sociology and economics over there, as well as Jamil, our own Jamil, will be joining him for that discussion. And as most of you know, he's in the midst of writing a dissertation on political economy, so he's got a bunch of stuff in his brain to share too. Tonight's training is going to be presented by Kim Marks. Kim is one of my board members with the Civil Liberties Defense Center. She also is part of the National Collective for Rising Tide, which is a climate change group. She's also one of the collective members for the Art of Dismantling, and all of her trainings are available up on their website if you are interested. She has worked on environmental campaigns since the early 1990s, campaigns that have spanned everywhere from a single day to one campaign that she's been working on for the last 14 years regarding ending corporate dominance, which started back in 1998. So she has a lot of experience in doing this in all different settings, and I'm really happy that she was willing to come down from Portland to give this training. Now, before I turn it over to her, I'm going to give a little bit of an intro to you, and this is coming from lawyer brain, not organizer brain. But a lot of times, Kim and I will tag team direct action trainings where I generally scare the poop out of everyone and she inspires them to do things. But what I kind of wanted to go over with everybody is, when you're engaging in any kind of activism, whether it's civil disobedience or direct action or, changing legislation, as activists in general, there are 10 humble suggestions for radicals living in a police state that me and one of the other lawyers that I work with CLDC kind of compiled. The first one is that you're living in a police state and you need to act like it. And what I mean by that is calling the U.S. a police state is not just radical rhetoric to impress your friends or to provoke your parents or your loved ones. It's true, and we have to make necessary adjustments as a result of that. What you know can still hurt you, and don't expect a state whose basic structures you are trying to subvert to protect you just because there's this thing called the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and laws and lawyers and all of those things. No state is that enlightened. The police state, U.S. style, kind of has taken on its own form, and it doesn't mean that the government is going to disappear all of us en masse. It means that we are increasingly trading civil rights designed to check government power for the illusion of security and that paternalistic promise that the police will only go after bad guys. Of course, the government has carte blanche powers to decide who the bad guys are, and it seems to change depending on their whim and who is in public office at that time, and there are no standards for them to apply to determine who is bad or not. The second thing is you need to know your rights and you need to practice your rights. And we've given several Know Your Rights trainings in Occupy. They're available on the CLDC website. We'll do several more. But the bottom line is you can't be an activist if you don't know what your rights are, particularly if you're stopped or you're interacting with police. And I know you've all heard it before, but it's amazing how many activists forget their basic training when the pressure is on. Yes, dealing with cops can be intense. And yes, there are exceptions. You know, sometimes if you are the victim of a crime, you're obviously going to have to talk to the police. Just remember that the more you go over it, the more you know it, the more you're comfortable with it, the more you're exposed to it, the easier it gets. Number 3, probably equally as important, is we all need to recognize and do an ego check and a bravado check. And what I mean by that, the Dead Kennedys have a song that says, "Riot is not just an unbeatable high, and punk is not just a form of dress." When we're working for social change, you're not doing it for street cred, to find a date, to impress someone, to get laid, whatever your motivation might be. Ego begets gossip, and gossip leads to casualties when working in social movements. Take pride in what you're doing, but don't take credit. As an exercise, try leaving a tip in the tip jar without the person seeing you do it. Also, consider ways in which you are a product of your generation and culture. Are you looking for a quick fix solution, or are you dedicating the research, the patience, and the vision needed to build a lasting movement for social change? And make sure you're being good to the people around you before taking your utopian beliefs on the road. Next, number 4, talk, but don't gossip. First, talk. FBI surveillance and grand jury harassment are processes which thrive on secrecy. Drag them into the light and expose them. Be loud, be assertive, be verbal, but don't spread gossip or innuendo or speculation. Prosecutors and police love to pick up on that. They love to hit the hide and listen for the buzz. Don't be part of the buzz. If gossip has a way of passing for fact, only pass on information which is public or which the government already knows. Know the law and why it will fail you, and seek legal support. The laws are constantly changing. You need to have good access to updated legal information, particularly when you're putting other people's liberties in potential jeopardy. When you're planning actions, you need to know what are the consequences, best case, worst case scenario, especially when then you are recruiting other people to join you who may have less information than you do. Make sure you know about crimes that are called inchoate crimes, things like accomplice and conspiracy and aiding and abetting and obstructing justice. All of these kind of vague crimes that are the most common crimes that activists face. Know your history. If you don't know it, you're bound to repeat it. Knowledgeable activists and movements have weathered periods of repression in the U.S., and for some communities, that repression has never ended. They have a wealth of wisdom to impart concerning political repression, and there's a bunch of books out there on these topics, like Brian Glick's The War at Home, or A People's History by Howard Zinn, Crazy Horse, the list goes on, and we actually have a long reading list on the Occupation Education website that lists off a bunch of these titles that you should check out if you don't know much about that. Number 7 is create and maintain institutional knowledge and support. Create groups and emails and media groups and attorney lists and raise support funds and, be organized. And remember that support does not consist just in lionizing people who get arrested as heroes. Support means sensitizing yourself to what the person who's being targeted or who's been arrested is going through. Try to understand the needs and pressures of your community members, and whether that's, offering to dog sit or babysit or, pay somebody's rent if they go to jail. All of those things are support that as activists, we need to be prepared and ready to do. And the other is don't get tactical paralysis. And what I mean by that, and this is probably one of the more relevant ones to Kim's training, the police are adapting and anticipating our moves constantly, whether it's because they are spying on us in our meetings and they literally know, whether they are trolling Spacecraft and reading about what we're planning, or whether they just happen to have a good idea of, every Friday we're doing a protest at the Bank of America. Direct action and civil disobedience may be noble forms of protest, but they are also typically a compensation for lack of widespread public participation. Dream up ideas for energizing and involving more people. Aim beyond the 6 o'clock news and aim beyond the 6 people that you're working with that are willing to get arrested when you're planning actions. And then finally, a famous labor organizer by the name of Joe Hill once said, "Don't mourn, organize." And the government cannot round us all up. The government cannot arrest us all. Its aim, rather, is to make symbolic examples out of a few people, to put them up on a pedestal and hope that the rest of us will be scared into apathetic silence and will go back to watching the boob tube and sitting comfortably on our couches. There are lots of things that you can do, write, be the media, but don't rely on other people to show up to protest. We all have to show up. We all have to physically be present. We need to testify against police brutality. We need to be witnesses for each other in court. And finally, set an example worth emulating. Most activists were not born to hippie activist parents. Remember what it was that sparked you to get involved and find that and ignite it in someone else. It's the easiest and strongest way to bring new people into the movement and make strong allies to work with in the future. And so with that, I will turn it over to Kim.
All right, how's everyone doing? Good?
I'm great.
Excellent. So tonight we're going to talk about how to plan an action, what goes into planning an action, why you do an action, what direct action is, in no particular order, a little bit around security culture, and a little bit about how to debrief and reflect on your actions. What I'm going to ask for tonight is if you have something to say or you have a question, raise your hand. And if I don't get to you right away, it's because I need to finish my thought before I call on you. And there'll be other moments where I ask for group participation and popcorning. Who's familiar with what popcorning is? Does someone want to share what that means? Chime in. And so I'm just going to ask everyone in the room to be respectful of each other. Don't talk over each other. Listen to what everyone has to say. Does that sound good? Awesome. So let's just start at the beginning. I know that you've been through a series of trainings, but I'm just going to spend really short time starting at the beginning. What is direct action?
Sitting in front of a bank to shut it down, or tree sitting. It's just one example.
One of many. Direct action.
I think any action that doesn't involve, say, indirect action, which I think to be writing your congressman or something where you try to get someone to act on your behalf, is typically a political figure.
Going up, being physically present at something. Trying to influence something.
I tend to think of one part of it, not all of it, as like breaking a law that you think is unjust.
Yes.
How about an educational forum?
Educational forum. What else? Demonstrating.
Boycott.
Picketing.
What, picketing? What else? The Quakers published a paper that I really like. It's called 198 Ways to Take Direct Action. And the reason it's 198 ways is because it's really unlimited. But it just helps start the brainstorming process of what works best for your group. So we have an understanding of what direct action is, taking action. I like to think about it as me deciding that I actually feel empowered to be like, this thing that's happening over here, I'm going to say, I want to stop it. I've had enough, and I'm drawing the line, and the line's here. And I'm going to hold my line. It's not like, I'm saying I'm going to stop it, but I actually might go meet my friends for lunch. It's deciding that you're going to you're going to take a risk, you're going to step up, you're going to highlight what's going on, and you're going to take a stand. And do you want to add to that?
Equally to I'm going to stop that, couldn't it also be, here's a thing that could happen, I'm going to make this happen?
Exactly. So direct action means a lot of different things to a lot of different other people. But I guess the real thing to look at when it comes to strategy and direct action planning is what is it? Like why use direct action as a tool? So I'll get you thinking about this. why use direct action in a campaign, as an organizing tool? And one example of why to use direct action is to take the unseen things, the things that the world's not paying attention to, and making it seen. Right? That's one of the strongest motivations for me for direct action, is taking that atrocity that's happening in the world and nobody knows about, therefore it feels like maybe nobody cares about, and it's shining a big spotlight on it, and it's making the invisible visible. So that's one reason to use direct action in your campaign. There are several others. What are other reasons for using direct action, or what are other ways direct action could be used to help your campaign?
With other forms of like what you might call polite communication haven't worked.
So I like to call that backing up your campaign, or reinforcement. Using direct action as a reinforcement to your current campaign. So maybe on your campaign you've done your educational roadshow, you educated your internal group, then you've educated your external group, maybe you've written letters. Maybe you're in a coalition and the letter writing group, part of your people have written letters and you've tried to get the media message across. Maybe the whole town of Eugene knows about the issue and cares about it, but no action is happening. The timber industry is still going out to cut the forest. They're still going to put in, the plants to destroy the wetlands. It's a way to use reinforcement to show that there's power behind your campaign. It's like an exclamation point. What else?
To stop something from happening. Putting fires in the people.
That is huge. Using direct action as a tool to both use it as a way to boost your internal morale, to help your group get itself out of burnout, to inspire yourself, is a legitimate reason to do a direct action. It really is in your campaign. Campaigns can be really long, and you do need to have some fun with them, and sometimes you do need to do a direct action that rebuilds trust, that is fun and empowers your group. But then also, direct action can be used to inspire the public. Wow, what that group did was amazing. I want to go work with them. One of the other major reasons for using direct action, it's a tool for escalation in your campaign. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that, and I'm going to risk drawing the whiteboard. I won't do any writing for you though. But when you're running your campaign, and you have a target that you want to move, you have to look like you're a force to be taken seriously, which means you don't do an action that's like, take all your resources, all your time, and wipe your group out, but it was an awesome action. And then everybody is burnt out and exhausted, and your numbers go down, or it takes like 3 weeks to recover. Instead, when you're doing your campaign, you want to do things like this, so your escalation can build. And we'll talk a little bit about how that intimidates your targets and moves them faster, and also how that allows you to build your group without burning out your members. Okay? Those are two key things. When you're trying to build a group and you're trying to build a direct action campaign, you're trying to move something, you want to run a campaign in a way that's constantly applying more pressure, in a way that does not burn out your group. There's some really important tools. I will not get into them all here tonight because I do strategic campaigning burnout avoidance workshops that are a little bit more specific to that, but we're going to touch on some of those tonight.
We planned a huge march not long back, and it was fun and it was great. And, then a lot of people just dropped out for a few weeks because it was a lot of work, We were all really tired afterward, and it was basically just to affirm something rather than protest something, but still, it took a lot of energy.
Sometimes in your planning process, you need to look at, well, we're going to get into this, your goals for your action, why you're doing it. But one of the things that you need to look at is, what does a victory look like? When you're asking yourself for the goals of the action, sometimes you need to ask yourself, what does a victory look like, and redefining those. And I often, we have these big goals, these big problems that we want to stop in the world. And the way we run our campaigns is we campaign on issues. But we have these big problems we want to change. And so, for me, maybe I won't admit mine right now. But no, my big goal is industrial collapse, or my big goal is to see, I'll leave it at that for right now. I can't sit back and wait and put all this unnecessary stress on myself and not celebrate or take victories until that happens. That's not sustainable and it's not going to work. So my goal is I've had goals, and my sole goal was to give the CEO I was targeting an ulcer. Pretty much, I wanted to stress him out beyond capacity during that week of actions against him, that he was looking over his shoulder and starting to twitch. Did I reach my goals? I did reach my goals. We can get into those later. Those are really, really important questions to ask yourself when you're going into action planning. What is this action for? Is it for highlighting the issue? Is it because we need reinforcements to show the people of Eugene that we're serious about our campaign? Is it for reinforcements? Is it for morale? Is it for internal and for the city at large? Or is it to call attention on the issue? And those are really good questions to ask yourself, and we're going to get into this again later. We're going to layer in some information, and we're going to go back to it again. So those are good key questions to ask yourself when you're planning your actions and we're moving forward in your campaign. So we're thinking a little bit about what direct action can do for you, for your campaign. What about where does direct action happen? I believe you guys have gone through some nonviolent direct action training. Is everyone familiar with the 6 intersections of where direct action happens? No? Okay. So there are certain intersections in this world where we have the ability to create change and put leverage on our targets. Okay? And so there's 6 main areas. Maybe you should write these down. So the first one, I'm just going to kind of start for the beginning for me, is direct action at the point of consumption. Not consumption, direct action at the point of decision. Point of decision. So when I say direct action at the point of decision, what do you think an action like that would be?
Going to a board of directors.
Yes.
Meeting.
Going to a big council meeting. What do you do with those actions?
You might protest outside or have speakers inside lined up.
The WTO is an example of a direct action at the point of decision. Right? They stop the decision makers from getting together to make a decision. So then you have direct action, and it's called 2 different things, either direct action at the point of extraction or destruction. So when I say that, direct action at the point of destruction or extraction, where do you think those direct action campaigns happen? Exactly. Keep the tree standing. Absolutely. What else? What's a good example of a campaign, maybe even one's going on currently, that's direct action at the point of destruction?
Like foreclosure, that people get kicked out of their houses.
Yes, before it happens. Mountain Justice Summer. Stopping the coal mining. So often in the environmental movement, we had a long history of stopping our direct actions here. We do road blockades, we do tree sits. But once if we failed our campaign, which we did win a lot of our campaigns, but if we failed, we often just moved on to the next timber sale. Instead of following the chain of custody and really going after the corporation and the system as a whole, like really targeting the whole system. And so if you're really looking at targeting a whole system, there's other intersections to continue your campaign. And to even do it simultaneously, all these things can happen simultaneously also. So if the trees, let's say the trees fell, the next place of doing direct action could be direct action at the point of production. So what comes to your mind, you can step out of the forest environmental theme if you want, but where would direct action at the point of production happen?
In an oil refinery, a chemical, place or factory.
Where else?
Farm workers striking in the lettuce fields.
Yep.
Could it be like if you're protesting lumber, can you go access the Caterpillar plant where they're building machinery to do this?
You absolutely can.
Okay.
I feel like the unions have set the best example of how to organize direct action at the point of production. Think about the General Motors strikes in Detroit, right? All the sit-downs and all that. They really have a firm understanding of direct action at the point of production, where the environmental movement maybe has a really strong, firm understanding of direct action at the point of destruction. So after you follow them through the mills, you have direct action at the point of consumption. So what does that mean? Where would those actions take place?
Stores.
Walmart. Is it paper? Is it like your forest that got cut? Maybe it's Home Depot or a paper store. And who's your target audience there?
Consumers and citizens.
It's also the CEO of that company to show them that you can cost them dollars and that you can destroy their logo. That they spend millions of dollars, some of them, to brand themselves. And so it's also a unique place to, yes, there's some educational stuff for consumers you can do, but you can really systematically target a corporation in a really good way when you do direct actions to the point of consumption. That's not just boycotts. Boycotts work there as well, but so does systematically going after the company as a whole and doing actions in their store. We did actions inside of Staples at one point where we did a bicycle ride through the old-growth forest of Washington State, and then we ended it inside of a Staples store to highlight where the endangered forests were going on the shelves in aisle 8. So, we got on the microphone, we're like, our old-growth forest is on aisle 8. We've had other actions where we pulled mattresses into the stores, and we had the CEO dressed up, someone dressed up like the CEO and someone else dressed up like a Forest Service worker rolling around on a mattress together. And that image stays with people, and your actions get impactful. So, hi everyone who just got here. We're going through the 6 intersections of where direct action happens. And your friends will be able to catch you up. So after the point of consumption, you have a couple of other arenas that I feel are not always utilized. And one is direct action at the point of assumption. Has anyone heard that?
I have a guess.
Okay, maybe yes.
Our society does all this other stuff only because of a whole bunch of assumptions we have, like the forests are ours to do with as we please, and they're an infinite resource.
Exactly. We have a lot of cultural truth is more meaning to people than facts. We have the meaning that people hold on to things are way more important to them than the facts. So their society, corporations, the media have put all these false meanings out there. It's jobs versus the environment. There's these cultural memes. The advertising companies are rock stars at this, where people have an association with what things mean. And sometimes they have to do direct actions to help break people's ideas, to help create the change. And so one way where this works is culture jamming, right? Billboard alterations. And I would have some good images to show you, and maybe I could get that passed around or something at a later date with some good images of good billboard alterations. It's sometimes taking known impressions. Somebody like the Canadian flag symbol. In Canada, British Columbia is trying to brand itself as like the green state, where actually it's like where some of the most aggressive logging is happening, and awful pipeline proposals and tar sands. It's just horrendous. And so one of the groups up there, did a campaign that was a shoe print on Canada on the flag drenched in oil. All right? It's kind of working with the cultural norms that are already out there and tweaking them in a way that catches people's attention and puts our new meanings on them. If people want more information on this, I really recommend going to smartmeme.org, SMARTMEME.org. They wrote a really good book called, a little handbook, not a huge book, Recolonizing the Revolutionary's Mind, to help us to think about direct actions in these terms and broaden our ideas of where direct actions can happen and how they look. I'm going to move on to the point, direct action at the point of potential, because I wasn't going to go through these this much tonight. But direct action at the point of potential, what does that mean? What comes to your mind when you hear that? The yes men. Who's familiar with the yes men? All right. They are excellent at doing direct action at the point of potential, where they do their own mock-up on the New York Times and put their stories that they want to see out in the world in there and get it out there. Guerrilla gardening or seed bombing. Who's familiar with seed bombing? All right. You take some mud and seeds and you throw them around and you create food for people in cities. These are direct actions. You have people who went down to Katrina and helped rebuild the city. These are direct actions that help us show and create the world as we want to see it. Are there any questions on that?
So were
occupying a vacant building and turning it into a community center be one of those?
But yeah, I think that's direct action with the point of potential. Absolutely. Awesome. All right, so that's a lot of information. Could we get that off now? Did everyone get that? And again, smartmain.org will have this all laid out for you in a nice template.
We'll put it up on the Occupation Education website too.
So I'm going to just step way back with this training for a second and assume that you guys don't have a campaign, and I'm going to assume that you're not one group and that you are here learning how to figure out how to take direct action effectively. And so with that in mind, there's a strategic campaigning piece to this information tonight that's good to have like a firm understanding of, so you can have actions that have the most amount of impact to your target with the least amount of pain to your group. Does that make sense? So you have to start off with the groups that you're starting, with the organizations that you're creating, or the groups of people that you've already started. It's really good to ask yourself, what is your vision for the world? Just go back to the beginning. What is your vision for the world, for the town you live in, for the environment, for the 2 acres that you live on? What is your vision for the world? And you write that down, and you can ask this as your group. You can get together in your next meeting. Ask yourself, what is our vision for the world? Do we even have a shared vision in this group? Do we need to have one in this group? Maybe we don't. But what is your vision? And that's a brainstorm. And it's really good to get an understanding of what you want this world to look like. And there's lots of activities you can do to get there. If thinking about it and articulating it in a brainstorm is not right for your group, then draw it. Draw what good world looks like. And then you can get really nasty, and someone can take your drawing and start drawing oil factories all over and toxins to help motivate you into action. Once you have an understanding of what your vision is, then you need to ask yourself, who is hindering you from reaching that vision? Who is standing in your way? If I want to see all forests protected and I want to see rewilding happening in the world, then there's a list of people who are physically standing in my way. There's the Forest Service, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of individual timber companies, there's organizations like the North American Wholesale Lumber Association. These are your targets. So you just want to ask yourself, who is hindering you from reaching your vision? And that's going to give you a list of targets. And that's going to open your eyes a little bit of all the different potential places where you could be organizing, having your campaign run. And you're going to have different targets during the course of your campaign, quite possibly. If your campaign is long in vision, like industrial collapse, not short-term goals. Then you want to ask yourself, as you start narrowing down on your targets a little bit, maybe you've gotten down to like 3 or 5 core targets, 4 people who are really standing in your way. There's 4 or 5 people. Maybe there's like 1 politician, maybe there's 2 really bad timber companies, maybe there's a bank. And you narrow down that list. Then you want to ask yourself, who else is this entity affecting? And affecting is the key word, because it's kind of a neutral word. That the people who work at the company is affected by the company. So you need a laundry list. Who are all the people affected by it? People who live in Brazil might be affected by the company because they live there. So you might not be able to answer all those questions at initial meeting. You might have to designate research to go out and find out, where is this company? Where does it have its fingers? Because these corporations are often multinational, and they're impacting people all over the world. And I feel like, as activists in the U.S., it's our responsibility to make sure that we don't protect our area at the risk of destroying somebody else's and creating a waterbed effect, and just moving the corporation from one town to the next or one country to the next, that we really squash them. Personal opinion. It doesn't have to be yours. When you start building that list is going to go to 3 natural areas. Clear allies, potential allies. Potential allies are people who maybe you haven't talked to yet. They might be like a neutral store even, like REI could be a potential ally for a forest campaign or not. The potential allies that's a creative list. So it's going to be possibly hunters care about protecting the forest because they want to hunt for maybe different reasons than you have, but they are affected by it if the timber sale goes through, and they use it, so they're a potential ally. And you make that list, and you don't generalize in that list. You don't say unions are a potential ally, because that doesn't work. It's like saying environmentalists are a potential ally. We're not all going to get on the same page. If you need to know what unions, what union number, from what are the different ones? Is the carpenter unions your ally, or is it the longshoremen that are your ally? And it's which local? And then you're going to make a list of all people who are your nemesis. the people who would organize against you. Who's going to organize against you? So if your goal is to save this forest, and Roseburg Forest Products is the buyer, Roseburg Forest Products and probably maybe some of their workers, unless their workers are trying to unionize, are going to fall into like your nemesis category, right? And so the goal is, and this would be in a separate meeting, but you would have at some point a meeting that says, how do we take our potential allies, turn them into allies? How do we take our nemesis, and how do we either move them into potential allies or just silence them? Are there any questions? Am I going too fast over the information at all? I like to see. Okay. Okay. So that's a really handy list. It helps you see all the different potential areas where your campaign could target, where you can build allies, where you can build coalitions. Because one thing that the direct action movement, I think, screws up is sometimes we come up with an action plan. Maybe it sounds like a fun action, or maybe it sounds like an important action. But then as an individual group, you need to ask yourself, but is that the right thing for us to do? And it's like, well, maybe it's actually the right thing to get the Sierra Club to do. Or maybe it's the right thing to get the unions to do, and we should just go have a conversation with them and see if there's a way to work together. Always important to make sure that the actions that you're picking and the campaign strategies you're picking are actually right for the current group that you're in. Which really gets down to having a firm understanding of your goals. And that gets back to having a firm understanding of your vision for the world, what you want to work on. Because there's problems out there. Healthcare is a problem. Logging, deforestation is a problem. Climate change, those are problems. And then we come up with issues. We come up with solutions and campaigns to run to stop or change those problems, right? So when you're doing when you're building your group, you want to look at the issue that your group is working on, the goals of that campaign, your group's goals. You want to understand your strategies and your tactics. And so that's a lot for people. So I'm going to break it down really simple, okay? Let's say you're a 5-year-old kid, and your problem is that there's not enough sugar in the world for you. That's your problem. So the issue is you want to go to the candy store. And so the goal is to get to your dad to take you to the candy store. That's your goal. The issue is you want to go. Your goal is to get your dad. Goal is to get to the candy store, and then the strategy might be to put pressure on dad or your mom, and your tactic might be to cry. So the issue is you want candy. Your goal is to be taken to the candy store. The strategy is to put pressure on one of your parents, and the tactic you're going to use is crying. Okay? And tactics, you really want to have a good strategy. Because the strategy is pressure on your dad, and crying doesn't work. You want to be able to shift your tactics to find the right tactic that's going to move your target. So if crying doesn't work, maybe cleaning up your room will. And that could be another tactic. Any questions on that?
I was particularly struck by your point of assumption to go for, and it's like if you want to get to the candy store, I don't know if this fits the example exactly, but it's like an assumption that's getting in the way of you, that it's probably getting in the way of a lot of other things you have. Is that like kids shouldn't be able to decide what they want to eat. Parents have to make and kind of more deeply than that, like kids don't deserve respect. Like they don't, and if you can get your parents to respect you more, you're going to be able to get a lot more of the different things you want.
Exactly.
so I just wanted to kind of throw that out there, and I think that often presents a conundrum of like, yeah, wow, here's a point we could go to that if we want it, might make achieving the specific thing we want easier, but we might not get that immediately directly now, but it's going to make a lot of things a lot easier and a lot better.
It's a really important arena to be in with direct action organizing or for running a campaign is we have major cultural norms and we need a shift for people. We need to shift the way people have been thinking, and that's really hard to do. And I have a whole workshop on building allies and community outreach and that gets into that. But just really briefly, like if you want to change, this is the same for Target, not just the general public, but if you want to change the way people think about something, you have to communicate to them through several different channels. And that means you have to do a little bit of self-reflection and honesty. Because you want to ask yourself, where did you have your aha moments in life? What changed you? What made you decide to shift your diet? What made you decide to go down to Occupy? What made you decide to get up into that tree? What were the things that influenced you that got you to where you were? A lot of people make the mistake of not doing some internal reflection. Because if I'm a stranger, and I go to you as a dead stranger and say, you should do this. As a healthy individual, a person's going to say, I don't care what a stranger thinks about me. One would hope. I don't know. I don't like to. You just don't there's not that much weight on it. But if you do a power map of your target, and you have a firm understanding of how change happens within inside yourself and within inside other people, you're going to have an easier time doing actions in that arena that's going to move people. So if you think about what really moves people, it's not protesters outside the building talking to a brick wall. That's a little weak. But if you systematically look at the person that you are targeting and do a power map analysis of them, and you figure out who's their spiritual leader, who are their peers, who are their mentors, what affiliations do they belong to, where do they get their news. You can get all the news coverage you want in the Eugene Weekly, but if your target is not reading that newspaper, you're only hitting half of your goal. You also want to make sure that they're feeling saturated by your campaign. You want to know who influences these people. There was a campaign, the Staples campaign that I worked on, and he was very, very religious CEO, and people organized the Baptist church leaders in the South, and one of the leaders of the area went to like 27 other preachers. Is it preachers with baptism? Sounding bad. I'm so sorry.
Ministers, maybe?
What?
Ministers, I think.
I really know this. But, sorry?
Spiritual leader.
Spiritual leader. And they wrote a really beautiful piece about how what he was doing was killing God's garden. He was responsible for destroying God's garden and God's creation, read from their Bible. And, during that shareholder meeting, we took over it. There was theater hangs. We were outside. We were being full-on obnoxious. But when that preacher stood up and read and then showed that most of the other ministers in the area had all signed on, he didn't lift his head during that meeting, and he resigned that week. Okay, now that's huge. Because in a cynical mind, you can say yes, but then some CEO took his place. And that's true. But what you took was power. Right? There's people out there that have power in this world, and part of our campaign is to shift that power back to the people. So we sent a strong message to that corporation, its board members, its shareholders, and every corporation, at least in that industry, that said we have the power to shift your corporate structure. We have the power to create change inside your company that you don't like, and we're not prepared for, and you had to stop doing business as usual and go into an emergency sense and find a replacement for yourself. Yes.
So are you sort of talking about what George Lakoff talks about as frame? You have to find a frame that fits the target or the person that you're trying to get so that you may be able to.
Yeah, that's a piece of it, right? I can't walk up to a preacher and be like, hey dude, I really need you to listen to me because I have this really cool issue that I want you to know about. And since I wasn't raised Catholic or Baptist, I actually wouldn't even be the one in my group to talk to them. The first question in our group is, hey, if the CEO is Baptist, we want to reach them. Is anyone in the group Baptist? They want to have family that's Baptist or know anybody? Great, let's talk to them first. It's really knowing your audience and who's the best person to make that first approach. A really simple mistake that happens in the forest movement, so it's so embarrassing when we have 18-year-olds out there in the loggers are like, I have 5 kids at home to feed and like a low-paying job and a hard work, and they're like, I know how it is. And it's like, are you kidding me? Don't lie to people like that. It's like, wow, that sounds really stressful. I can't imagine. It's going to get you so much further in this world. And so when you're doing your planning, you actually have the time and luxury to help you figure out what allies you need, what coalitions you need to help you move your target. And you might not be the best group for this. It's like, well, we really need this religious angle. And so maybe you need to go talk to religious groups to see if they're interested in working on your campaign. But if you're going to get another group to work with you, the first thing you need to do is go in and ask them what they're about, what they're working on, and you need to do a lot of listening. You need to build trust, and it doesn't come quick. That's why planning takes, time, and there's some steps. Are there any questions on that? How are people doing?
And just to throw in my 2 cents, this example that she put up here, I know people who have been drafting campaign proposals or trying to, and some people have been a little bit confused about tactics, strategies, goals. This is a good example of the difference between each thing. And just to emphasize it, your goal is to go to the candy store. The strategy is, I got to get mom to drive me there. How are you going to get mom to drive you there? Your tactic is cry till she takes you. So that's a very simplistic breakdown. Especially tactics and strategies, it seems like people were more confused about the differentiation between those two than maybe the others. And this will, kind of give you a good framework to latch on to.
The other thing is with the candy stores, you're going to want to, like your long-term and short-term goals. So maybe your short-term goal is to go to the candy store now, the long-term goal is to make sure this happens weekly. or that your parents keep candy on hand in the house. So you usually want to have with your goals, you want a long-term goal and a short-term goal. Is there a question?
To me, the strategy sounds more like a goal. Like, mom takes me to the store. Like, it's not my strategy, that's the thing I'm hoping.
But the way you're going to achieve the goal.
Relative to the goal, it's what's helpful.
How are you going to achieve your goal and get into the candy store? You're either going to have to walk or mom's going to take you.
Strategy is kind of like the plan, right? It's how...
I know, so I've got it.
So, yeah.
What I'm realizing all of a sudden is that actually you can sort of insert as many as, there could be many layers.
Yeah, there can be many layers. You can have multiple strategies inside of a single campaign. In fact, most of the campaigns I've run had 2 or 3 major strategies. Some of my campaigns had 2 or 3 major goals.
I guess the thing I realized, the thing I said before was in the waypointing too, you might realize you have an even higher goal.
Yes.
That it's like,
So, and then the thing is that the question is, how are the tactics you choose going to move your strategy, which is going to help you get to your goal, which is going to help you win your issue? These things need to go. There's like a little checklist to make sure they run back and forth. Yeah, you can pass that out now. I'm going to pass this out. I'm going to break us into groups in a little bit to do a little exercise to kind of help you guys think about this more and simplify it in small groups. So what I want to do is, just because I've been talking a lot about issues and goals and where does direct action happen and the different reasons for doing direct action, I just want to take a minute to solidify that for all of you. And some of the best ways to learn stuff is to actually have to do it yourself. And so what we're going to do is we're going to break into small groups. First thing you're going to do is just brainstorm a couple targets. And just try to come together quickly on a target. It could be Wells Fargo, it could be a politician. Quickly kind of choose a target together and then come up with 3 to 5 actions that will influence them. So that means you're going to have to think about some tactics to use. And then after we come back, we're going to talk about logistics of planning those actions, the steps it's going to take, all the tools you're going to need, the timeline for it, all the resources you're going to need. So,
Move that again.
Yeah, I'm going to break you into small groups. You guys are going to pick a target together, individually. All groups have their own target. You're going to come up with 3 to 5 different actions that could influence that target. Okay, be at first, and circle up, and move away. I'm going to give you 15 minutes to do this. So if you kind of, maybe you guys in the front, to be a group.
Can we do Walmart for a target? Yeah, I love the target Walmart. Okay. All right, now,
No objections to me.
3 to 5 actions. All right, I would say, do an informational ticket the store. Ticket the store. Do an informational ticket line in front of the store.
Are we blocking or are we just ticketing?
Just ticketing.
And why did we make a decision to picket instead of blocking?
Just to begin to educate consumers and to alert the store that we've got our eye on them.
Put in a flyer? Just voice?
Well, we have 3 to 5 actions, so we can't move on.
What about this one?
I don't know. What do people think?
I have no idea about it. Look,
Does it sound like a good idea?
I like the old business. I would think it's there before. Okay, so we're trying to warn the customers, but we're not going to entertain with them. We're not going to interrupt them, and we're trying to fly, let the store know we're on to them. On the case. Are we going to suggest certain things about something that so much to choose from places? Are we going to just pick on Walmart about one of the cars, things they did, like predatory pricing or human rights violations? What's our issue? Which is in? Focus. I'm not expert on that. Okay, so we need to pick a focus of spends, right? And do we want to ask the customers to take any action themselves? Do we want to boycott a certain product or a certain time of day or pick a certain item? Will customers who are already advocating to do it are being boycotting? Probably not that day.
Well, I think there may be in the future.
Maybe they have a day that say takes 27th, because I'm already buying like this shop there. It's a couple of things, so many people are buying there because they can't.
But I think that's the reason why it's important to let them know why Walmart is so bad, so that even though it is the cheapest place I can go, I realize that it's the wrong thing to do. And you have to, to me, you have to set up that sort of ethical issue first off.
And recognize.
Yeah.
Just that.
Yeah.
They're good people.
Be careful to do that in such a way that you don't and not point care. Somebody feels
Right, so they don't turn off. Yeah. So if there's 3 to 5 actions, then if that's one, then where would you go from there? Like in this idea, I don't know. I guess there's the idea of escalation, keeping it fresh or something.
What would we do if we
I guess I'm not really clear on what we're supposed to be doing.
What does that mean, reaction? It needs reaction. That way it hurts our target, which is Walmart.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like how Walmart doesn't pay their employees very well and discourages against having an informed union. Like they're not a very good employer, right? So I think that would be a good angle. I don't know what the action would be. Trying to communicate with these employees.
Well, maybe that's the trouble. Maybe we could find an ex-employee who give a testimony kind of thing. Those are sometimes CEOs or managers of places who get screwed, or women, or people of color get screwed from Walmart. You hear their stories. I mean, I set up something. I don't know. What if we like tried to get every customer, or as many as we could, to write a letter or something, or give them a thing with their name on it, how much they spent that day, and say, we don't like that you don't pay your employees well, or we don't like that you don't get health insurance. The feedback from the customers to get the employees. That way we'd be on the side of the
I'm a Walmart customer, and I have just learned about these various injustices, and I want you to do that.
Yeah, and I just spent $120.
So like petition, so sort of having like a petition where customers are signing on.
Yeah.
So we're going to escalate Walmart. So what if they were to take you get as many customers as possible, and they take their receipts, how much they bought in the store, and they take it to the windows, and they write notes on the receipts saying, like, you're not paying your
4 minutes, everybody.
or whatever.
4 minutes.
So that's sort of like a direct action for the customers to get involved and try to make Walmart, that they're not happy. And it's very visible, and it's something that the news would be able to know.
And it might attract, you might get the media ability of testimony that you're talking about, saying we're going to have some, what do they call it, whistleblower type news about how Walmart treats that would get people there. What's the third action?
I wonder if other, because the problem with predatory pricing is that they put little businesses out of out of business. So it wouldn't be interesting to hear from them, that's along the line of testimony, but wouldn't it be interesting to have 25 of those kinds of small entrepreneurs who would otherwise be hiring local people and keeping the money in the local economy, but for the predatory pricing that happened the year that they, and I remember when the store became a mega store, there were wetland enthusiasts that I was among were, mad about that. There was anything we could do to change that, If you heard people's stories about it, though, and that got the media attention, you might care. So you mean recruiting people who have, like other businesses who have been either driven out of business or negatively impacted by the mega store? I don't know how you
Well, you might be able to, it might tie in like with the people stories of, Walmart people, former business owners, employees who are now working at Walmart.
Exactly.
I mean, those business owners actually take over the building. I think I've seen the documentary. Did you guys see the documentary about Walmart? Oh, it's, I forget the name of it, but you can find it on Netflix. And they talk about the mega stores, and Walmart will build a mega store, and then they'll leave a few years. And so there's a vacant, huge costly building that nobody can afford. And, something that would be really direct action like is that all of the local business owners go and reoccupy that building and take it over so that they can't pay for it.
Make it a mall. They turn it into a little mini mall.
Right, yeah. And they take it back and they set up their business in there.
I like your idea about joining in. I like the idea that the CEO had circle something. They had to get a certain critical mass that were X number of feet wide to circle the goal. Localizing it kind of. Look at how hard it would be to trace. So there would be like I think not you have to be persuasive. You really have to come up with there's a story, some of the arguments that break down make them feel, make them reflect. But I like the idea of taking over the store. I mean, why not? That's the next thing. Like find a vacant store and encourage business owners to come in and set up a common market.
Yeah, the community is going to go crazy and ask them, why are you taking over this building? And it presents the opportunity to talk about how Walmart and the Metastore has devastated the community and the local businesses.
So it might then impact something that went on in another community, because that would hit the news.
All right,
Another
let's go
town.
there. Wrapping up their discussion. Come on back.
All right, how was that for people? How'd that feel?
Fun.
Okay. So now, really quickly, I'm going to ask, maybe Sarah, you all, you're right in front of me, or whoever your group was is sitting here, because you were going a mile a minute. Is that you?
Yeah, I'm part of that group.
Yeah. Can you share just really quick?
So our target was Walmart, and so we started with an informational ticket to kind of educate customers and to alert the store that we were targeting them. And then we moved on to having customers sign a petition, telling the management that they want the store to change their practices, to recruiting former employees who would talk about the unfair employee practices. And then we moved to occupying a vacant Walmart. And encouraging small businesses that had been driven out of business by the mega Walmart that had then been abandoned to come in and set up business and make a common market. And then we were going to storm the shareholder meeting. But we also really good.
We also targeted Walmart. We wanted them to leave town, and we came up with 5 things. We wanted to try to organize the employees, so we thought about maybe making a job fair, finding other local employers that would offer them employment so they didn't have to work there. We talked about stopping the distribution centers, direct action, blocking the roads with our cars, talking to the independent drivers who might cooperate with not picking up their goods. We also talked about kind of flash mobbing the city council, putting pressure on them to pass a resolution that only allows stores with headquarters in Oregon to operate in Oregon. And then we thought we could make an action to educate and convince customers by finding cost-effective local alternatives. The tactic would be to try to organize an employee-owned co-op where we could offer those goods at a similar reasonable cost that we compete with Walmart.
We went for the big shots, we had a pretty large goal. It was to turn the Valley River Center into a community center for homeless housing and medical care. And so to do this, with a little bit of creative inflection from the spokesperson here, we talked about a lot of different things. But it starts out with an informational kind of picket with petitions and information and everything. And then a day where there's about 3 actions that kind of happen at once. There's a big, 350-person march of a bunch of sort of people with money that are like, fuck the BRC, and they march on Valley River Center. And at the same time, just before the march shows up to the Valley River Center, there's we contact a whole bunch of homeless people and say, hey, we're going to have a flash mob here at the BRC. Go in there and bring your tent and throw down and shoplift some stuff and put it in your tent and get a whole bunch of people together to do this. And right after that happens, the security's like, what the hell's going on? There's a big $1,500 money drop all throughout the entire mall, and everybody's going crazy trying to get all these $1 bills that are falling from the sky, and then the cops show up and all the security clears everybody out of the mall, and at the same time the gigantic march of white people with money show up at the mall, and we all go inside the mall and occupy it, and after that we turn it into homeless housing.
The group over here?
I don't think we really fully settled on a target. We started with everything from throw a brick through a Starbucks window to whether we could shift the basic assumption that nature is ours to do with as we wish, or that the distrust of real democracy, you can't trust large groups of people to make decisions together. For the lab, we did spend a lot of time talking about that kind of thing, and my biggest takeaway is not to try to use such systemic strategic goals in 15-minute example sessions. But one possible target would be the public, and the governance structures, and one particular direct action would be organize our own, public forum on budget and come up with a budget that is just on the face of it obviously so much more rational and reasonable than what the legislature or council comes up with as a demonstration that is possible. And there is as you may know, participatory budgeting going on around the world, so there's a lot of things to draw on for something like that. We also talked about targeting the media to change the way they report news on these things, like in Michigan, where they're appointing city managers, to take over certain cities, and that, the media often portrays those things as like, oh, it was a mess, and so this one person had to come in and tell everybody what to do, and then the trains ran on time. Yeah.
Some of those ideas are great, and I hope you captured them. In the real world, you're going to take a day or maybe even 2 days to come up with all this stuff. Or you're at least going to have an hour or 2 hour long meeting to do that. You're going to maybe have known each other and already been working with each other for a while, and you maybe already know your goals, and that will make it simpler. So I passed out something called a tactic star. Did everyone get one? This is a tool that you can also find on Smart Beams. All right, and this is a really easy way, once you've kind of picked a couple of direct actions you want to do, a couple tactics that you like, it's a way to test them to make sure that the tactics that you chose are actually going to help you reach your goals. Because it's really easy to get caught up into what sounds fun versus what's going to have the most amount of impact on my target, or what's going to help me reach my goals. So, not that when you start direct action planning, you start with a brainstorm. In that brainstorm, you dump every idea you can think of. And the basic rule of brainstorming is it's a safer place, so every idea can get thrown up on a whiteboard like this without anybody's eyes rolling or attitudes or interruptions or correcting somebody. A brainstorm is a sacred practice where we get a chance to grow as a movement and push past the ideas we think we know of what effective action is and really throw some amazing ideas up on something, sheet of paper, wall, chalkboard, whatever. But this is a tool that helps, and it plays itself out pretty self-explanatory, so I don't want to spend a lot of time going through this tonight. But you always want to ask yourself if your tactic is to, if your goal is to take over a Walmart, if your goal is to put Walmart out of business, give me a good goal for one of your campaigns that you're currently working on.
Unionize the employees.
Okay. Was that one of your goals? And that's yours? Tell me a couple of your direct action plans again.
Maybe the distribution center.
Okay. So, if that's your goal, does that move your target?
Well, your target is flow of their goods and your hurts their business, so it moves us towards the goal.
Okay, so restate the goal on your target.
Driving them out of town.
Them? Walmart. Okay. And one of the ways you were going to do that was by organizing the union?
Right.
Okay. So then organizing a picket is one of your ways to influence or move your target. Absolutely. That would have an impact on your target, right? One would hope.
What would your picket do to be effective?
What would your picket do to be effective? Escalate. Always leave room for escalation. And just let me explain that for people. A lot of people misunderstand what escalation means. Escalation does not mean getting more hardcore. It does not mean putting more swear words into your chant. It doesn't mean chanting more. It means you're changing what you're doing. You want to be unpredictable to your target. So if you start picketing outside the store, the next week you maybe want to picket inside the store. But maybe you left right away when they ask you to left. And the following week you go inside the store And instead of a huge picket, there's only 3 of you who get on the intercom system, and you start talking about your issues. You've escalated your target, but you don't have as many people. You always want to look like you're growing. So if one day you organize a 10-person picket, and the next day you only have 4 people going, you don't want to show up and do a picket because it looks like you're losing momentum. But if you go from a 10-person picket to 4 people, and you go inside their store and you just get on the intercom, they're not going to notice how many people you have or that you had less people. They're going to notice that you intensified your action. You did something that they weren't expecting. Or you show up where the CEO is having dinner and you hand them a menu of all the destructive things they do to the earth. There's just one of you, but it is an escalation of tactics because you've changed it. You've also changed it. You go from protesting outside their brick building, talking to their walls, to going inside. Or making it more personal and doing the research and figuring out where these people play golf, which country club do they go to, where are they taking their vacation, and you move your protest from their place of business to their place of leisure. Yes.
How do you figure out if what you're doing is upsetting the customers more than your target? Or do you want to upset the customers?
You have to ask yourself what your goals are. And if your goals are and you want your customers to be your allies, then you don't want to upset them. But if you want to shock them into what's going on, and if you want to shock them, and it's okay to upset them, that's where you're at with your campaigns, then it's okay. It really comes down to where are you at in the campaign and what makes sense. Turning the customers against you when you're organizing against a corporation doesn't make sense because you want to turn them against the corporation, right? You want to hurt them financially. So getting people self-righteous about where they shop isn't going to help change them to stop shopping there, right? So getting the customers mad at you is not necessarily the best tactic to change it. But you don't always have to. That doesn't mean that it means that you should be respectful and educate the customers. They're your education base, which is why when you plan an action, one of the roles of the people, especially if you're inside a store, is whose job is it to pass out the leaflet information to communicate to people while you're there. If you do an action and you don't have a communication to talk to the people who are walking by on the street or to the media, then if a tree falls in the forest, no one is there, did it fall? Gets back to that,
What if, for instance, you do a block of Walmart and you don't let any of the customers in that day? Is that a smart tactic?
It is if
you're trying to do a shutdown.
Absolutely. It's there. If it's in the right order for you guys to escalate. If you said, especially if your demand says we want to close you down, and we're doing it, it just depends on how you're doing it. Absolutely. But to maybe come out of nowhere and run out and do a lockdown and get people arrested might not be the best choice for your campaign because you might be getting people arrested prematurely.
You're saying you would build a campaign and get a lot of PR and a lot of things going, and you would escalate to that. You would start with.
Yeah, but then Walmart's an interesting case because a piece of action planning is knowing the history and kind of the landscape of the campaign. Walmart is actually a very old campaign that's been going on with lots of actions. So even though maybe your new group hasn't done a lot yet, there's room for you to move your campaign a little bit ahead. If you already know this particular store has been targeted a bunch, you already know this issue's gone out there and people are out there, you don't always have to start at the beginning, because someone's already done that work for you. So it's really, really important for you, it's really important as activists to really understand the history of a campaign, really understand how far other groups have taken it and where you are. And if you're starting a brand new group with a brand new name, you also need to introduce yourself. And I like to introduce myself in a way that makes the people understand that, we're going to win. You should be afraid a little bit. We're going to win. And so I like to start off, I like to grow and become unpredictable and stay strong. And one of the best ways to stay strong is to not issue threats that you can't actualize. So you don't say, we're not leaving. If, in fact, everyone is leaving at 4. You don't do that. You don't, and you don't say we'll be back if you're not going to pull off being back for a month. You can, but you really want to make good on your threats if you're going to issue them. Otherwise, we look like flakes, and we don't look like the force to be taken seriously. So you want to be really, really thoughtful. You don't say I'm gonna hunger strike until Walmart goes out of business, because chances are you're not going to pull that off.
Or what about we're going to stay here all night, knowing that likely the police are going to be able to extract you. If it's cops busting you up, are you still allowed to issue the threat of we're going to stay here till we rot or something like that?
You can't, because you can't control the police. But then the question is that smart? And I really, really like people to double check the goals of their actions. Because if you're going to stay here all night, and you know the cops are going to be hostile, they're not going to let you get away with having an overnight there without really arresting people, you need to ask yourself, is this the appropriate time to get people arrested in our campaign? Because what happens is if all your folks go out and get arrested at once, all of a sudden you don't have any more people to go do direct actions, you're doing legal support. And you shift from being a direct action organizing group to a legal support group, because you do in fact have to support the people who've gotten arrested. And so you know, it's fine if you know the police are going to move you, but the question is that the smartest threat for you to lay out in your group? And is that really what you want to do? Do you want to stay there all night, or do you want to do a planned action? You know, it's kind of up to you and where you're at in the campaign. So at some point, it's been absolutely effective. We've had people spend the night outside of buildings. But you know what? 2 or 3 people can be really effective all on their own doing stuff versus hanging out outside of a building at night, too. So it just depends on where you're at in your campaign and where your options are. And I like to believe that our options are limitless as long as we've done the research and found all the areas where you can have your actions. Does that make sense? Is 8 implicit? Yeah.
Just tracing backwards from escalation, like you're talking about escalation from one direct action to another. And you mentioned at the beginning, like direct action is when your indirect action has failed. So in a way, it's just a continuation of that. First, you try to just talk with people and say, hey, you could do this other way. And then when that didn't work, you escalated into direct action.
I always like the opportunity to be able to smile at a CEO and say that I gave you the opportunity to do the right thing. I crashed your awards ceremony and made a fool out of you. I gave you 30 days to make the right choice, and you failed. So you have only yourself to blame for the situation that you find yourself in tonight. So, absolutely. I think it's really, really good to give them the opportunity, let the press know you gave them the opportunity to make some change, and at that special, special moment when they're having a meltdown at the bar, you get to lean over to them and be like, you really brought this on yourself. So, I've had some special moments with CEOs, and it feels good. So I'm going to keep going through this. I think if people have questions about this, I do live in the area. I do feel like this is pretty self-explanatory. These are just really good questions to ask yourself. It's really easy to get lost in the tactics, the direct actions you want to plan versus really understanding if the ones you're choosing are going to move you towards your goals. And these are just really important questions to ask and to look at and reflect. And it doesn't,
So using that tactic, you know, we have an actions committee. Would this be something that the actions committee should use to assess plans and proposals that are coming before them?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a really good like criteria to run your stuff through. And then the question, and then one of them in here is on the timing. Is this the right timing? You know, if you know, we had an action campaign that we were doing on 9/11. I was like, why isn't the press calling me back? So I guess for living rurally and not with a television. I didn't know. And people are like, should we plan our action for tomorrow? And it's like, I don't think we're going to break through the news for a while. You know, actually, we need to take, like, the climate has shifted so much that we actually need to step back and understand where our campaign is in the larger landscape now, which is one of the questions here is the landscape that's going on, like what's going on in the external world. Because you have to understand what's going on internally with your campaign, what are your goals, what do you want to do. You also have to understand what's going on externally in order for you to help with your framing, in order for you to help understand how you're going to get impact out there. When you're looking at doing press releases and being heard, it was something like the White House gets 100 press releases, puts out 100 press releases a day alone, just that. And that statistic was from like 95. So you're just getting drowned out. And there's major things in the news, or if your town, every single environmental reporter is being saturated with this one issue, you know, you have to think, you know, either you don't have to tie into the issue, you really have to have an understanding of what's going on. But this is a useful tool. If there's questions, people can email me questions also, or, you know, Lauren. I'm just going to go through really quickly how to actually plan an action, everything you need to know to do that. I'm going to kind of go through it a little fast, so you just stop me if you don't get a piece of it. So there's a lot more information to go through. You see your group knows its goals, its issues, you know, you understand your strategy, what you want to work on, you're getting into action planning. You want to have a brainstorm. We talked about that. Maybe you picked your targets at that point. Maybe you've picked, you've brainstormed out. It starts with brainstorming. What is it that you want to do? You have to have a firm understanding of the history of the campaign so you understand where you want to go. Maybe you're a new group that rose up out of another group. So maybe the Earth First had a really active campaign against Roseburg Forest Products, and they were storming his house and taking over his country club, and the escalation was up here, and then you're the new group, you're the Cascadia Forest Defenders, and you want to save the same area against the same company. So possibly holding a candlelight visual outside their house is too much of a step down, right? That campaign, you're going to have to come up here because that's what they're used to be heard. That doesn't mean that you're not holding teach-ins and educational events to bring the public up to speed with you, but you want to understand the history of the campaign and the landscape. You want to be really clear on your goals. You're choosing to do a direct action. What are the goals of this direct action? The goals of this direct action, are they to highlight an issue? Are they to reinforce your campaign, to show that your campaign has peace? Is it to build morale, either internally or in the city? Or, is it to call attention on the issue? What are your goals of action? Is your goal of your action to occupy the building for a week? Is your goal of the action to occupy the store for 2 hours? What are your goals of the action? Are your goals to stop that timber sale, or is your goal just to highlight the issue that day and get out and go back to town and do organizing to get a bigger infrastructure put in place? What are your goals for the action? You're going to have to look into allies. Who do you want to work with? And you've had a workshop on how to build allies and work in rural communities, and we went through that a little bit earlier. But you might need to have allies to work with, like lawyers might be a key ally if you're planning on also breaking some laws. You might want in your group or not, or at least knowing where you're at in the campaign. You want to hone in and really pick your target for that action. Once you've picked your target, let's say it's, I guess we'll just keep on the Walmart thing. Let's say it's Walmart, you need to recon the area. Because you don't want to pick your action. You can decide that, you want to do direct action and that Walmart's your target, then you need to go recon it to help you decide what kind of action it's going to be. You don't want to sit in a little room and be like, we should really do a banner hang, or we should take over the inside. But yeah, if you don't want to do that in a small room. You want to go out and see what's happening. Some activists had some unfortunate mistake, an embarrassing mistake. They wanted to do a banner hang on the roof of a building, and they didn't do the recon first, and it was like the police station. So the police station looked up and they see people on the roof of the building. And so you really want to do your recon to make sure that you pick the right action. Now, had they done their action inside the building, maybe the cops would have gotten there so fast. The company didn't even have to call the police. They were just outside on a lunch break, and they're like, hey, there's people in all black on the roof. That's no good. So it's a really short-lived action, and activist got arrested. Unfortunately, with a banner drop, he could have easily snuck up there, dropped the banner, snuck away, no arrest, and instead they wound up getting some jail time.
And they could have been shot under the road.
And they could have been shot. It depends on what city you're in, where you're at, what the political climate is. Some countries, you just wouldn't try that at all. That just wouldn't work. So with recon and with reconning buildings, there's a whole lesson and checklist which I could email people on what you're looking for. But you want to understand shift change. Shift change has the most amount of workers and security there. It also has the most amount of chaos. You want to understand who, if it's not Walmart but the corporate office, you want to understand who has access to this building. What do they look like? Can we look like them? You want to do at least 24-hour surveillance of the area that you want to do an action and have a firm understanding of what happens in that area. You want to put a tripod in the street? That's great. You need to go out there and make sure there's not electrical wires that run at the 12-foot level and your tripod's 18 and you're going to electrocute yourself if you want to have an effective tripod. So with reconning, you go with at least 2 people, you keep your eyes wide open, you memorize the area, you're able to draw a map, maybe take some photos. You look at what kind of handles they have on the door. People have shown up to do actions to lock themselves by their neck to the door, and they got there and they didn't have door handles that you can actually lock the U-lock to. So the recon's really important. It's a really important piece. You take that recon and you bring it back to your group to discuss your different options. And you kind of go back into brainstorming mode. This is what this place looks like. Hey, the news studio is right across the street from us. Maybe we should figure out a way to incorporate them into the action. Or hey, lunch break for the middle school event. This could look like all the kids are at the action. Recon is really, really important. There's a lot of pieces to it, but ultimately, you want to do the best action for the area that you're in. You want to understand, if you want to do a banner hang, how big does the banner have to be? It's always embarrassing when your goal is to hang a banner over the corporate sign and your banner's smaller than the corporate sign. Or your banner's too long and doesn't fit over the building, so it doesn't work, or you've rigged it wrong. And this is all because, yes, we have done these things. So it's not exciting when that happens. But so you really want to have a firm understanding. You know, you take tape measure or like a rope, so you can like go to people and measure out, you know, how wide are things. I've gone as far to apply for security jobs so I can understand shift change and get in the back room and see what the cameras cover. I've gone as far as convincing the head security of the hotel that I wanted to have my wedding there, so they would give me the full layout of security, shifts, cameras, and everything of the hotel so I could do my action. You want your information. And the best way to get it is not to be necessarily all sneaky and dressed in black. I just went in and acted like a hysterical bride. And they were like, let me give you the password to our computer system. Oh, that would be handy. I was like that. And then she's like, oh, I don't have time. Just type it in for me. But, you know, don't be afraid to ask for what you want. Sometimes they'll just tell you. So don't get all, like, James Bond complicated. I'm going to sneak around the perimeter and count the cameras. If you can come up with a reason for why you need to know that information, just ask. My family has a lot of jewels, and there's a lot of people with money, and I just need to make sure that security is safe here. Can you break it down for me so I can explain to my uncle so he can approve our wedding being here? Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Sorry, my caveat to that would be if you do recon because you're going to do something that is against the law and you are inside the building on their security cameras asking questions like, where are the cameras? They save that footage for quite a while, and I will get that in discovery to be used against you when they prosecute you. So just be aware of what you're doing when you're doing it out in the open. And, you know, even in the dark, I mean, so many buildings these days do have surveillance cameras, and so you do just need to be aware, you know, that's going on.
Do not get caught doing recon. That means do not dress the way you normally dress. I mean, does that mean, I had...
Or someone who's going to lock down should not be the person going around doing the recon.
Absolutely.
But even if it's somebody else, you could get into that inchoate thing you're in a conflict or something.
But the person who is out skulking around at night taking pictures should not be the one getting themselves caught by the cops the next day.
Yeah. So you can get bigger sentences, and this is where you have a group. Everybody should recon the building that you're going to be in. Everyone should get a chance to walk around, understand the exits, where they're going, what the goals are for that day, and you should dress in a way that you don't normally dress. The best way to dress is in a way that the people who are there normally look the way they dress, so you don't stand out at all. So you really, really want to blend in. And yeah. Good point.
And just the other thing I'll say too, you know, this doesn't necessarily have to involve any legal action. You know, if you're doing a rally or you're planning a march, you know, you want to know how are you going to end the march, what's the route going to be, and so, you know, it doesn't have to be, you know, hardcore stuff that we're talking about in terms of every action should have recon involved.
Every single action, you need to know where to tell people where to park their cars, what bus they can take to get there. You know, we had an action where people had to park on the corporation parking lot. After we took over the corporate office, we actually had a hard time getting our cars back. That became an action, to actually obtain our own vehicles back. Which is not a fun way to spend the day. If you had a really empowering action and then you got to spend hours in the town, like sneaking around and like figuring out how to get your car out of there. You also need to understand where is your emergency meetup plan. In cities or the forest, you need to know ahead of time where you're regrouping to make sure everyone got away safe, everyone's okay, who got arrested, who didn't, to do a debrief. After you've done your recon and you're kind of figuring out what action you want to do, that allows you to figure out who you need to recruit for your action. What skills do you need? What are your resources? How much money might you have to raise in order to do this action? What kind of gear do you need to do this action? What kind of trainings do you need? You might have found a really inspiring action that you want to do, and just because you don't have the skills doesn't mean you can't find someone to teach them to you so you can do them. You don't just stop because your skill level is here. You find, as a part of your action plan, is you find somebody to train you. You get those skills. Don't let lack of knowledge keep you from doing an action, but don't do an action that you don't understand how to do. There's lots of people in this world who will give you the tools that you need to do those actions safely. On the back of your star, I have action logistics roles, which is just an idea of all the different types of roles that you need during your action. This is the type of the team you might need to recruit in order to do an action, depending on what your action is. This is kind of like an ideal team. Some of these things could be one person doing multiple roles, but some of them can't. And so I'm going to leave that on the person checklist. These are the types of things types of roles that you might need before an action, during an action, and after the action. You're going to want to, as your group grows, or before it grows, you want to be really, really clear. This is not necessarily in order. You're going to be really clear about what your demand set is, or what is your message for the day. And you want to, and that's part of like building your media strategy, but that's also part of the story that you're telling. Our campaign should be story-based. We're telling a story. We have this larger story of this world we want to see. What's our demand set? You know, we demand that you close up shop and, you know, give the town back to local mom and pop businesses. We demand that, you know, whatever it is, you need to figure out and agree on what your demand set is and have a solid message. You want to figure out the tone of the action, and that gets back to figuring out where you're at. What's the tone of the action? Is it a fun action? Are you trying to make people laugh? Are you trying to make people cry? Are you trying, you know, what is your tone? What are you trying to get across to the public, to your own group, to the company that you're targeting? What is the tone? We talked about timing earlier. You know, is this the right time for the action? Are you ready to escalate to that level? What's happening in the external world? You need to have your press and media ready to go. You have to work on that ahead of time. You want your press advisories to go out at least a week before the action, right? And so you really need to have that in the pre-press area. And you need time to practice media. A lot of people struggle with, and I don't want to say screw up, people struggle with media. What happens is video cameras make us a little adrenalized sometimes. And reporters are exceptionally good at asking questions that have nothing to do with what you're doing. And we have been trained to answer questions. So we need to untrain ourselves to answer questions. And we'll end with an exercise that will help that. And be really clear on what our messaging is. And it should be 2 or 3 really simple sound bites. And, you know, make sure everybody in your group should be able to articulate the goals of your action and the reasons that you're working on your campaigns and be able to talk to the press if they have to. Once you've picked your actions and you know what you're going to do, you need to practice your actions. And yes, if you're going to U-lock yourself to a door, that means running around your house with a stopwatch and somebody drill sergeanting you a little bit, rushing around to see how fast you can get those U-locks around your neck, or whatever direct action tool you use, how long it takes you, repetition. Because when you go into an action, you're going to get a little bit more adrenalized. So you want to train in an adrenalized state, you want to put a little pressure on each other, and time yourself, and see how fast you can start working with these tools. You also want to have a plan A and plan B. So you might as well just say, this is our ideal action, but this is what we're going to do if it doesn't work out. Here's our plan B. You want to know how you're going to end your action.
That includes, like, for folks that are going to get arrested or have gotten arrested and they want to engage in passive resistance, the idea of going limp, you actually need to practice that too. You know, have somebody shove you around and try to pick you up by one arm and not swing at that person. You know, all of these tactics actually take practice.
Yeah, it all takes practice. It's a really good way to build trust, to build your affinity group, to build your team. It's fun. And when you go into your actions and you're able to get your tripod up in under like 8 seconds and somebody in it, it feels good.
What is the in it tripod?
I will explain that afterwards.
Oh,
sorry about that. Sorry about using random terms. A really important thing that a lot of groups forget to do is in their planning sessions, when they're planning their action, is how to plan how you're going to end your action. And it's really important, and I think it's really important that we are empowered to end our own actions, that the cops don't dictate when our actions are over, that we actually have a plan. We know when we've met our goals for the day, and say our goal is to take over the building, get on their speakerphone, get our banner hung, whatever your goals are. If you've reached your goals, you want to know that maybe it's time to leave. You know, if you can do an effective action and not get arrested or get caught and go away and get your media coverage, you can leave and do another effective action the next day. The cops coming in and bullying us does not mean our action's over. We need to dictate the terms ourselves. Now, does that mean the cops aren't going to come? And you can decide part of your action plan is we're going to say to the cops, drag us off, and that's fine. But I've done actions where I said, I'm going to take over this office, we're going to walk down to the front doors, we're going to stay until we've danced on the dust. We've had direct conversation with the top VPs and CEOs in this company that we've delivered to them personally our clear message. And then with the energy still high, we're going to leave, unlock, and get out of here. And that means that you're going to have scouts in the building, so if the cops are going up stairwell southeast A, you're going to take your team down the stairwell northwest section of the building. And we've had plenty of actions like that where the cops have gone up and we've calmed down and there's been no arrest. It's a powerful thing when a CEO does not get rescued by the cops. But the corporations don't get rescued by the police. They see us, they're going to call the cops are their heroes, they're going to come and remove us. But if we come, we do our action, and we leave before they got rescued, they don't even know why we left. And the leaves them in a really unsettled place. I prefer to leave my targets in an unsettled place. I don't like them to feel like they have the cops at their beck and call to remove me. That I removed me and they don't know why, and they don't know when I'm coming back.
Well, and the other thing I'll chime in on that, we've had a couple of actions where the police just simply don't come. We're literally waiting around for the police to come because that's what we've planned. And so we have to acknowledge that with this movement and our local police, that is a tactic that they have successfully used and will likely use again. And so we potentially need to discuss changing that and making that so that that's not how things go the next time.
You don't want to loiter around, especially if your job is to build a movement, or if you want to build a movement of people who feel empowered to take on these corporations or to take on the government. They need to not come to your action and have it like slowly dwindle in numbers and some people wander off and leave and it gets small. It's always better to move them along and celebrate, make sure you get their information so they'll come out to the next thing. If you go from 30 people outside the building to 2 during the course of your action, it looks like you lost a lot of momentum. And so it's just something to think about is when do you call your action?
Yeah, my question was, in those circumstances, how much time did you have before the police came? And just the curiosity.
We had like an hour and a half, I think, that time.
If it was like in a city, like in Eugene, like a small city, like it would probably be, what, 15 minutes?
I don't know. It just depends. In Portland, we've held up for an hour. I've been in small towns.
Well, remember how afraid they were during our march because it was homecoming weekend? If we had done something, it probably would have taken hours for them to be able to divert resources.
Yeah. And also time when you do it for other
things going on in the city.
Yeah.
They're going to have their resources divided in this town.
Depending on
what's going on.
Yeah.
Depending on what your action is, what part of town it's in.
Huh.
So you just want to think about all those things. And it's really, it's important to think of when do we call this action? Well, if people start moving away, maybe we should move. Maybe we should turn it from standing outside the building to a march, or maybe we want to move it inside the building. But it's really important to ask yourself, I would encourage people to figure out what looks like a successful action and when do you want to call it. And it's okay to choose how you're ending your action. You just need to do it in an empowering way. It's like, thank you all for coming out. We just accomplished this, and this today, which brought us closer to our goals. I hope you'll all come to our next meeting or teach-in. We're gonna go now. Why don't you all walk with us to a safe place like a park where we can circle up and get trade information. Don't leave new people standing by building after you've done an action. Don't get them arrested accidentally.
Yeah, along those lines, last week we started a weekly Bank of America protest, and there were so many cops that showed up even before we got there. I had people calling me saying, like, I'm seeing all these cops, I don't want to go. And that really pissed me off. And how would I deal with that to make people feel more, we had no intentions of getting arrested or doing anything illegal at all. So how could I combat that, the fear that people have? It's supposed to be a fun event, just, get together, have some fun on the sidewalk, and all these cops are scaring people away.
Well, you could take the megaphone and say, thank you, Eugene Police, for being part of the 99% and coming out to our protest today. Here's a sign.
Right. I did do that on Facebook, but not there at the time. Yeah.
You should prepare people in advance.
What?
Prepare people in advance. There will be cops.
Yeah, you can also prepare good chunks of your people for Plan B. Like, if we get there and the police are there, we're going to all of a sudden make this look like it's a march. We're going to march around the corner to a safe place like the park and circle up and maybe go to the Bank of America that's 3 doors down.
Good place to stay.
So just move it away from where the police are. But this comes into how you're organizing with your affinity group, and what kind of quick decision making that you're able to make. Because if you keep it as a part of the plan, you're going to be able to move people with you. If it looks like, okay, actually it's a march, and we're gonna stop at all the banks in the area today.
Well, and that's, part of the discussion. When you announce that every Friday you're going to be doing this, you should expect the police to attempt to deter you from making that a weekly obstruction to the bank,
It's where like sometimes weekly or daily visuals don't always. Sometimes they work, and sometimes they don't. Depends on the town you're organizing in.
Or like distract them or improvise and just go to a different bank that we disagree
Meet up
with and shut up with them.
at Bank of America and go someplace else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, this should all be part of your action plan. Plan A, Plan B. Go through, what are all the things that can go wrong on this action? What are the things that could stop us from accomplishing our goals? Actually address them. And then come up with an alternative plan that you're already on board with, so you don't have to try to have a consensus meeting in front of a bunch of cops with your team. Just run this through when you're planning your action, which is why it's really nice to plan actions, 30 days out. So you have time to do the recon, time to learn the skills, at least a couple, you want some time to recruit people to build your movement instead of a bunch of hectic-looking, partially planned actions. It's good to step back and slow down and figure out what can you do weekly that maybe still applies pressure while you step back and do some serious planning of some bigger actions. Or, I've done actions with a week of planning or even a few days, depending on it. We've done actions where, somebody happened to be in that hotel, and they're like, hey, actually, there's an oil convention here. And it's like, oh, right, we're on. We're going, and we're gonna do this action plan in a couple hours and figure it out. But are we gonna invite the masses to join us? No. I'm gonna invite my really solid team that I already have a good working relationship with to figure out how to be spontaneous and creative. After every action, one of the roles of the action which is on there is you need someone whose job it is to bring the group back together to do a debrief of the action. We don't grow as a movement if we don't debrief our actions. What worked, what didn't work, what would we like to see differently. If we don't come back together as a group to talk about that honestly, it takes away our ability to grow. And you need to set that up ahead of time. Try to even set a date ahead of time. It's really hard to pull a group of people back together because they get tired after an action.
So when you do a debrief, do you just do the core group that was planning, or do you invite the masses or all the people that attended for the debriefing session?
I invite the team that planned the action.
The planning team.
Unless the planning team was working with multiple groups and it was like a folks council thing.
Okay.
You would have a bigger one then. But no, not with the general public. The general public, you might invite them to their next meeting, and you might ask them, do they say one thing that you liked about the action? Do they get a chance to participate?
Yeah.
Say something, give some feedback. You want feedback.
Yeah.
But no, this is your group's process, This is your ability to be like, wow, I can't believe I said that to the media. Or, be honest with each other and create a space where it's safe to admit your mistakes and move forward. How am I doing on time? 8:28. Does that mean I have 20 minutes? I have 2 minutes. All right, I'm going to respect your guys' time. I am going to just talk really quickly about security culture when it comes to planning actions. A lot of people have there's a misunderstanding about the best way to use security culture effectively. Okay, we do full security culture workshops. There's lots of different jobs out there in roles with groups and subgroups. But if you're doing public actions and you're trying to build a campaign, you're trying to get people to work with you, then you have to have some suspended disbelief and trust and create a warm, welcoming space for people. A lot of security culture goes badly. It really comes down to bad social skills. So a lot of people abuse security culture by actually totally incriminating themselves and doing things like, oh, that's neat to know, or, well, I know that, but you don't need to know that. And there's a lot of, if you really don't want people to know that you're working on something, then you need to work on your poker face. You don't whisper in the corner of the room while everyone's piling into the action for the secret parts, because if there's listening devices, whispering does nothing for security culture. All it does is alienate the people you're working with. Some of large public demos, I saw people trying to mask up and wear all black to protect themselves during the 100-degree weather to protect their identity. And so if it was too hot, so they're wearing tank tops and shorts where all their tattoos and piercings were exposed. And I was like, Awesome. I mean, as is, you more or less, you can identify people in black ski masks based on how they walk. You can usually identify your friends, and so can the cops. And so sometimes you do need to wear masks to protect your identity. And I think it's a question of the tone of your action. You know, it's really hard if you go and take over a CEO's house or give him a warrant, a citizen's arrest warrant for his behavior, and you're all dressed like spotted owls, or buddies, it's really hard for the CEO to tell the media that you guys were a scary group. A scary group of 12 people dressed up as buddies. You know, and their faces were still protected, maybe, but it's a different tone. The take-home message around security culture that I like to talk about is awareness is being 2 steps ahead, paranoia is 2 steps behind. It's being 2 steps behind them, and our job as a healthy movement is to help call people out and help them through their paranoia, so that they can be as effective as they want to be. We need to help each other through that. And you need to decide what kind of actions you're doing. The worst abuse I've seen of security culture, and security culture is important, is you need to prepare the team of people that you're bringing into the action on the action. So you don't lie about what the action is. Time and place, it doesn't matter as much. Those are the obscure details that you don't want the feds to know. There was an action camp that happened where there was a couple hundred people who came, and they told the people that they were preparing them to take over a corporate office. So they trained them on how to take over a corporate office, and then they pulled over the freeway and expected people to know how to shut down a freeway. Like a highway wasn't a freeway, it was a highway, a rural highway, but still moving cars. You need to prepare people for the actions that are going to happen. You can't put people need to understand the risks that they're taking. Now, if you're a sub-affinity group that's showing up to escalate inside of an action, or you're showing up at Sierra Club rally to like drop a banner or to take over the building or something, you know, but you have to be honest with the type of situation you're putting people into. It's not your job to give people felony charges. It's not your job to make decisions for people. And if you want to build your group, not one person of those 200 people who spent 2 weeks together came back to ever work with those groups again, because they all felt lied to, and trust was broken. And really, all we have is our trust and our credibility. We don't have millions of dollars to spend on corporate campaigns, on advertising campaigns. We really have our trust and accountability. And if the type of action you're trying to plan isn't work with the group that you're trying to plan it with, start your own group. Just means you're not working with the right people. There's millions of groups out there, and you can form your own group. You don't have to force a group to comply with what you want. You can say, hey, clearly this isn't a match. Start separate groups. There's a lot too. There's a lot to say about that. I am going to be respectful of your time. Will people give me a minute to do one role play really quick with each other that helps us break our patterns on answering questions? We'll help you with the feds and the media. Sure. So can we form a circle somehow where we're kind of touching shoulder to shoulder? Is that possible to kind of make a little space somehow? So we got a circle going, shoulder to shoulder? We got a circle going. Okay. All right, so I'm going to stand in the middle. This game is a questioning game. There's just a couple of simple rules. You have to ask a question. You can't answer a question, and you can't ask the same question as asked of you. You can't repeat a question. And so the way the circle works is that you can go either direction, though. When a question comes to you, you can go this way or this way. And if you hesitate, say, or you answer it, or you repeat the question, then you need to step out, and the circle gets smaller. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm.
So we ask a new question. We answer a question.
Answer a question with a question. And so you just kind of we're going to stick around the circle, but at any point you can switch directions. It's up to you. Do you like the color blue?
Yeah.
And it goes to you.
Do you think Santa Claus was Jewish?
What's your name?
So that's what are you doing for Christmas? Next birthday.
What day is it?
We're on the beach.
Sure.
How old are you?
What's your mom's name? Do you like applesauce?
Why are you so awesome?
What's up, Doc? My name.
Yeah, go for it.
Have you edited video on super space stations?
Where are we? Why do you have glasses?
What is the sun about anyway?
You gotta look at the print. Sorry.
Oh, what is the sun about anyway? Am I out?
Yeah, look.
Is that a rule?
Gotcha.
Why are you here?
Why?
Get in, people.
You like sauerkraut?
You like cats.
Where'd you get that hat?
I haven't seen tomorrow. Is it today? Does that make sense?
Who?
You like the color green.
How come it's so cold in here?
What does purple taste like?
What week is it?
When are you going on vacation? How much good weather is it?
Do you have a quarter? Oh, it sucks. Like, I'm out of here.
Are you a communist?
What are we going to do at the end of this month? When will we realize it's time to get out of Afghanistan?
Have you thought about it? How do we fix the polar bear?
What's your political party?
Why is it that the dogs don't like cats?
Why don't cats fly trees faster than we do?
Why haven't I re-registered this ring yet?
Why can't you change your clothing?
The laundromat's so far from the house. Yes.
How much does it cost to wash a load of clothes?
I don't know where to find quarters. I don't know. That's fun.
Where do you get change around here?
When does the bus come?
Are you financially secure?
Hamburger stick.
How far is it to Cincinnati?
Chicken fingers, sports bacon?
Shit.
Okay.
What do you have?
Do you want to stay for it? What's the first one? Do you want to go game?
Looks nice girl like you do in a place like that.
How old is your son?
What? Are you in a relationship? What are you doing?
Are we gonna go out tonight?
What time?
Your place or mine?
Is it my turn?
What color do you like?
Have you ever been sad?
Did you get a haircut?
Are you wearing Ask Me for a reason?
Oh, my God. Yep.
Why is that, Rosemary?
When is that coming?
Why don't you ask for your question?
What do you think?
What is she thinking?
What is he thinking?
What happens to all this stuff by day one?
Not even what? How's your mom?
What will happen when there's only two of them?
Why is this guy coming?
What happens when I go away?
My name.
How many colors are there really?
Are you having meat symptoms? Are you vegan?
What should I do now?
Do you eat flesh? The two of us. Me sick? What's your voting age?
Are your ears bothering?
Does your mileage vary?
I'm traveling.
And what do you want anyway?
What's that electric car?
The same reason Julia Assange is.
Where'd you go? Oh, wait. Oh, this side.
Oh, right. Where'd you get your shirt? Why am I wearing black right now?
Who are you at? Are you, I have a shirt. Why do you have a flower in your hair?
What color is it?
That was pause.
Right here.
Do you vote? Yes. Shift.
We both won.
Thank you, everyone, for participating in that and coming out tonight. If you have any questions or you want any more material on action planning, I have some resources I can email you.
Oh, yeah, don't we have your
Has a
email?
bunch. What?
Do we have your email?
She does.
Okay.
There's ways to get a hold of me. Good luck.
Yeah,
I hope you have lots of successes.
Right, yeah.
You were talking about how to talk to the press, and if they ask the off-subject questions, how to bring them back to your message,
Yeah,
right?
here's the rule. You never in the media hear a press say this and then that. It's only you talking. You never see the press asking their questions. It's only you. So you don't have to answer anything they ask. You don't. You might just come off, but you don't.
So don't forget, next Wednesday is Max Ramos, spread the word, foreclosures and consumer debt.